So this is the backpack that I am traveling with for this trip, and I would literally put everything in here, my equipment, my clothes, absolutely everything. And it's very practical, it's water resistant, and that's really what you want in a pack. So just diving in to see what I have in here. In this particular instance, we're going to have an output of film, but then also photography. And initially, I would just light for film or for video and then shoot photography that way. But that was until I realized the magic of flash and what you can actually do with flash. So for this particular trip, which is quite self-contained, we're only going in to Lviv for a couple of days. So it's very quick and contained. I've actually packed two different kinds of lighting setups. One of them is the video lighting setup, which is literally just going to be this, and it's going to help me either key someone if the lighting's quite dark, or it's going to help me fill something in if I can key from a window or if I'm outside. They're actually quite strong lights. These are Quasar Science. You can change the color temperature, so you can make it daylight or tungsten, and yeah, they have different kinds of levels of intensity, and I find that these lights are great. They also have magnets, so you can attach them to a lot of kinds of metal things, and you'd be surprised at how many I find along the way. And so I find this pocket quite good for that. Now, in terms of photography, you're going to be a little bit appalled at the size of this, but I decided it was worth it. So the whole top of my backpack is one big flash. And this is the ProPhoto B1. I could have brought the ProPhoto B2s, but I often find that I just love these lights. Like, I love what I can do with them. I love the intensity. I love the spread that I can get when I have, you know, different kinds of diffusions and things in front of them. And I've just found that even just one of these can completely radically change the vibe or the setup that I'm going for. And because in this particular instance we are going to go for magic realism in one of the setups, I think that this light's going to be really, really handy. Put that down. Okay. In order to diffuse that light, I have brought an umbrella. So generally, I would have used some kind of soft box. I really like working with 5-foot, 3-foot octa boxes, but because I'm packing everything in this carry-on bag, I found this little umbrella on Amazon, and I'm going to test it out for the first time now when we go and do the shoot, and I think it's going to work great for the purposes of this. Then I've got some of my clothes, which you're not particularly interested in, but I do have a monopod, and I find this to be really important because when you're moving quickly, the reality is that setting up every time with a tripod, and especially if you're actually going to a conflict area and you might be going to a front line or something like that, setting up a tripod I don't find to be incredibly realistic. At most, I'd say a monopod, at most. And I think that just for the purposes of what we're doing, this is going to be great. Part of the prep, though, also was trying to figure out logistics of what we're going to do when we go into the place. And in order to do that, I connected with someone on the ground that lives in Lviv that's actually going to help us translate, that's going to help us drive to the location. But she's also a hobbyist photographer, and she offered to bring a tripod and a stand, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, and I said yes. And I think a lot of the logistics of your shoots or what you intend to do can be really, really improved upon if you take the time to just do your research, connect with people on the ground. Like, that part of prep is so important because it can make the difference between something that's successful and something that isn't, but most importantly, something that's safe and something that isn't. When I'm working in a place like that also, it's really important for me to make sure that people understand what I'm asking them to do. And I have release forms. Now, this is not something that you would be able to do if you're really, you know, in the middle of a shootout or something like that. You're just shooting, right? But because we're going to a children's hospital, I need to get parental consent to make sure that the kids are allowed to be in this photographic project. And I also want to make sure that it's in their language. So I've got these release forms, which are just standard model release forms, which I translated to Ukrainian in advance and then sent them to a friend who speaks Ukrainian just to look it over and make sure that, you know, everything made sense. And so we've got these, and the hospital's already got copies of them. So I'm unsure at this stage whether they'll have already given it to some of the parents of the kids that we're going to be working with, or if we're going to be starting from scratch. And those are some of the things that we're just going to have to navigate. Now, because we are quite controlled in this environment as well, I have brought a balance board. And really, this is just something that can come in quite handy if, for whatever reason, you know, we just have one photography flash, for example, we want to bounce something, or if we have the one video light and maybe we want to get some bounce off of a window or some bounce off of the light itself. I just find that having one is really handy, and they're also incredibly light. All right, so what do we have here? I have got cards. I think it's really important to have enough cards. You don't want to be in a situation where you're shooting something and you run out. Then we've also got extra batteries. This is for the flash trigger. So I've got a Pro Photo trigger which slides onto the camera, and I'll show it to you now. This guy, and so literally you turn it on, you put it on top of your camera, and then this works on AAA batteries, so you don't want to run out. And I've just got a few extras in case. Then I've got this little guy, so if we ever do want to tripod something, this is probably what I'd be using if I really want to have that kind of stability, and if I'm going to have the time to set something up with someone sitting down. Then I would just find a desk, a chair, an object to put this on. Everything that I do tends to be quite, you know, on the fly. You're moving quite quickly, so obviously having something like this that can help you easily is good. Now, moving on to camera. So I've got the R5 C with me. I've chosen this camera for this project, and this is a phenomenal camera when you're shooting hybrid. So if you're doing photography and video, this is kind of my camera of choice at the moment, and this is because of the incredible quality that I can get. So, you know, you can shoot raw light in this, you can shoot RAW, you can shoot XFAVC, 422 10-bit, which is probably what I'm going to be doing. You can go up to 8K if you wanted to, and that's obviously not something that I would recommend, simply because when you shoot something like 8K, that's phenomenal if you put this camera on a drone and you want to kind of punch into something, or you're in a very quick moment and you're just wanting to grab something, put it into 8K. But I wouldn't suggest shooting the whole thing 8K, just because you also have to think about post and storage space. How many cards are you going to need? Because you don't know how much you're going to end up shooting, and you're probably going to end up wanting to shoot as much as possible. So you want to also be realistic with what you can do with your storage. Then there's also the editing of 8K material, which a lot of computers won't be able to do. So you have to really just think about what happens in post when you're choosing your equipment. I'm probably just going to be shooting 4K. You know, things that I like to use, and you'll see them when we're actually on the ground, but I've set up these buttons to have things like false colors, which I really, really like to use when I'm on the fly. I really rely a lot on false colors to expose properly and obviously have a waveform. And yeah, so I've got enough batteries for this camera also. That is one thing to bear in mind with this camera, is that the batteries do tend to go fairly quickly. So it's one of those ones where you want to make sure you don't run out. So I've got quite a few of them with me, and I've also got chargers, so we can do that. Now, in terms of lensing, I've just brought one lens, and that's what I'm going to be on. I'm going to be on a 24-70 the whole time. And that's because I want to minimize changing. I want to minimize complication. I want to just keep things as simple as possible. And really just have my brain focus on what's important, getting the story, doing it safely, but also being incredibly nimble. So I don't really actually want to occupy my brain with a huge amount of tech and a huge amount of options. I just want to go, these are the choices. We have made these choices. This is what we're working with. Focus on this. And, you know, be efficient, quick, and get out. Then I've got a strap, and I really like working with a strap, which I'll put on the camera. That's simply because I like hanging the camera off my neck or having it around my hand, and I just find this a really, really useful thing to have. Now, this is a spare battery for the flash. light. I only brought one spare because they tend to last quite a bit of time, and I'm not going to be shooting a huge amount. Like, I'm going to set up and I'm going to know what I'm going for, so I think 2 will be enough. What else have we got? Okay, so hair. This is a Lee filter that I will open for you now. So here we have this filter, which obviously I like to work with when I want to get a more shallow depth of field. So I've got an ND on my lens that I put on, and I can decide, you know, if I want a really shallow depth of field, even though it's bright, I can actually control that even more having this. So I quite like having one of these. Now, because we are shooting video, we also have audio, which ironically, these are actually the same ones that I'm wearing at the moment. But I've got these little Wireless Go Rhodes. And I have found these to be awesome little microphones that you can, you know, pick up. They're not very expensive and they work really well. They have about 7 hours worth of battery life, and then they charge quite easily with these. They connect to your camera with that, and then you have the option of actually putting a mic on them, like the one that I'm wearing right now. Or you can actually use these fellows where you can actually go straight on the mic, which is here, and then you'd put those on if you're outside and you don't want to have the extra mic. So these are quite versatile, and I find for this purpose they weigh nothing. Like, honestly, it is so light, it's great. I've still got a blower with me. I just find this to be important. I once was shooting something where I had a little thing get on my sensor in the middle of a protest, and it was just there, but there wasn't any time for me to actually take the lens off and do a proper clean, and I just ended up having to shoot quite a bit of stuff that had just that little dot, but it was just like very chaotic, so I couldn't actually get it off. But anyways, I find this helpful. Charger for the camera with spare battery. And then what else have we got? Oh yeah, okay, so obviously you want to have with you a way to store your information. So I've got a card reader to download everything that I shoot. And then let me see in here. Oh yeah, I've just got some kind of microfiber cleaning cloth in case of emergency, and this is also super, super light. It weighs absolutely nothing, so that is great. And really, I think that that's the majority of everything. Right, so as you can see here, you can choose whether you're going to be shooting on video or photo on the R5C. So I'm going to start with video at the moment, where I've attached this 24 to 72.8 RF lens. And what's really cool about this camera is it's dual native ISO. So I've set it to 800 ISO, but you can also go to 3200, which is actually really helpful because you'd be amazed at the amounts of times that you're losing light quickly. You have an amazing story, and just being able to switch over is fantastic. Obviously you want to make sure that all the buttons are set up to a comfortable place, so you can go into the menu and actually assign each button to what you want. So one of the things that I did, let me just take this off so you can see, was put false colors at number 10, just because it's so easy to see. And then you can actually see here, I can't see, but you can, you know, how quickly I can check false colors. And so I really love that. Then if you click back, then they're off. If you click at number 7, here I've put the menu, so you can actually go through each thing, whether you want magnification. So I find magnification quite handy. Just sometimes it's not even for focus, it's for the purposes of understanding what am I seeing, especially if you're dealing with fabrics or actually setting something up. You want to make sure, okay, is that actually in the frame or not? You can magnify to do that. And then you can decide, you know, for very quick moments, if you want a button to be auto iris, if you need auto color temperature, what kind, for example, of focusing you want. So you can choose focus where you have face priority, where it's always going to be focusing to a face. You can set the speed at which you want that focus shift to happen. So do you want it to be immediate and very, very quick, or do you want it to be kind of a more cinematic, slow pace? And I think, when you're thinking about a journalistic piece, I tend to have my brain, even though of course I want it to look beautiful, my brain's more occupied with the story, the kinds of, the quality of the interviews that we're going to be getting, how much information, how informative are they really going to be, how much access am I going to be able to get. So I find that is where my brain's at. When I'm thinking about more cinematic or more creative storytelling, I'm actually trying to think about logistics of, if we meet children at the hospital tomorrow and one of them says, I imagine a dragon, how am I going to be able to pull that off in Lviv at the moment? Are there fabric shops that I can go to that will be open at that time? Lviv's got a curfew going on from 12 midnight to 5 in the morning. What other kind of ripple effect things are happening in the city? How much stock might they have of particular things? So it's all things to think about. And we'll find out tomorrow. Some things might be feasible and some things might not be, and we're just going to have to adapt. And I think that's the key with all this gear and with all of these things, is that you have to plan, prepare, but then adapt. Plan, prepare, adapt. It's always really that. And then it's just going to be adapt, because you find yourself adapting to one thing and then suddenly one more element's changing and one more element's changing. And so one of the reasons that I like to stay this nimble is that I've got everything with me at all times. Like if I need to run somewhere, if I need to change plans, and I thought I was going to go back to where I'm staying and suddenly I actually need to go somewhere else, there's no, oh my God, I need to go back, and no, everything's in one place. I'm ready to go. I've got my passports, I've got, anything that I might need. Another thing that I'm gonna obviously set up before I go is having a SIM card. And that's something now that I do with Airalo, which is an app that you can download on your phone, and basically you get to get a digital SIM card. So you don't actually have to wait to go to a place and then put a SIM card on your phone. You can literally just have that as soon as you cross the border. So I find that to be also very helpful. So it's just all of this is really just about making your life easier and allowing you to focus on what's really important, which is the story, the safety of the people that you're working with, and your own safety, of course. Obviously, your best friend is really going to be your phone. I find this to be an incredible tool, and it's just thinking out the box with it as well. I've had situations where, for example, maybe we weren't planning to shoot as long as we were, and we have an amazing interview, and I've actually recorded audio for an interview on a phone before, and to be honest with you, it wasn't that bad, depending on what's going on. But for the purposes of online, I've found it absolutely fantastic, like absolutely no problems at all. Obviously, if you're gonna go for something more like broadcast or something like that, quality is not as high as you would from other mics, but I think it's something that's quite helpful. Also, before going, it's important to see where you're going, to understand basically how you would get out should anything go wrong. This is particularly important for protests or like live conflict areas. Is you think you went in on one road and you'll just come out the same road, but actually that could get blocked. There could be tanks there could be a protest there could be shooting there, like you just don't know. So actually, spending a bit of time on Google Maps and understanding the lay of the land, what would happen if this were closed off, or if what building could I go into? What are the buildings around this area like? An interesting fact is, I saw the hospital has an underground bunker, right? So we don't have that problem of thinking, okay, if there were an air raid while we're shooting, we know where we're actually going. So doing research and having this, having on your maps, I often screen grab just the map of where I'm going, because what happens if you don't have signal in that moment or whatever, just take screen grabs of where you're going to stay, the address, the contact number, because if anything is to go wrong, you have a plan. Another thing that's going to be interesting that we're going to have to figure out is that when we get to Lviv, we're going to get into the city in the middle of the curfew. So there's going to be limited transportation capacity to get to our hotel. And we're going to have to either get a private taxi or we're going to have to figure something out to be able to get there. So it's just being aware of what's going on, understanding the lay of the land, the news, staying current with what's happening. All of these things are part of prep, and they're part of really of your gear, of your just internal knowledge that you need, which is equally as important, if not more important, than what you're physically taking. So yeah, I think that's it. And if anyone has any questions, you know where to reach out to me.